Hi Dusty Betties and Dusty Boys, I'm Tess and this is Steve. Welcome to Dusty Betty. Today, Steve and I are going to chat a little bit about the Spot Rollik.
Tell me about your first time seeing the Spot Rollik.
The first time I saw the Spot Rollik was when I was at the Sedona Mountain Bike Festival. Steve had done a test ride on it and he was like, I'm not going to tell you anything about this bike, but you need to test ride it. And so I did. We headed over and I didn't think it was much to look at, but it's all on the ride, and I had an awesome demo on that bike. And
she was pretty sick at that time. We didn't know she was pregnant yet, but I remember she was just like, I feel awful today, I've hardly eaten anything, I have no energy. And I'm like, you gotta do it because we're never gonna be in the vicinity of another Spot Rollik in your size. And she's like, okay.
There was a storm looming too, so we were like, it might rain, but Steve was like, let's just go out even if it's a short loop. And just in the short ride that I did on it, that was all I needed to know. It was pretty awesome. Like, one of the really unique features on this bike is the rear linkage. It's that living link, that carbon leaf spring, and the living link is really aptly named because if I could use one word to describe this bike, it would be that it's lively and not just going down and not just going up. I mean, it's lively in all the places that you take it. And if you guys followed me while I was bike shopping, you'll know I took quite a long time about it. It was like I started in the fall with Outer Bike and it took me until the springtime to come to a decision. And I really wanted a higher travel bike. I was ready for something that was a little less hesitant on the techie downhill stuff. Even though I loved my 5010, I was ready for something with a little bit more travel. But my biggest reservation was that, I'd been on a high travel bike before, and, depending on what you're doing with it, it can feel a little bit sluggish. And so I was really, really concerned about that. But, I mean, the Spot was the perfect solution for me. When we were in Santa Cruz, I could ride Demo Forest and we could do a lap that was like flow, and it was still peppy and playful and lively and fun on that descent and pumping around the turns, and I could have a blast on that. But then we could go ahead and climb again, have a breezy, wonderful climb on it, and go down a really steep, techie, natural, a more aggressive style of trail, and I still felt like I was happy to be on the bike I was on. And that was probably why it took me so long to choose a bike, because I still wanted a bike that could do a little bit of everything, and I really got that out of the Rollik.
So a lot of people out there just kind of ride the first bike they tried or whatever they run into. What advice do you have for them, and why did you hunt and hunt and hunt?
I think it's really hard when you're shopping for your first bike, but at least in a situation where I am, if you find yourself at my point where you've been riding for a couple of years, you're gonna have a better idea of what you want. And so I would say take your time and take advantage of free demo days. I'm amazed, a lot of people will send me emails with questions about things and their shopping process, and they'll say, there's no events or anything like that in my area, and I'll be like, where are you from? And I'll do a quick Google search and I'll be like, Santa Cruz is gonna be an hour away from you in 2 weeks. In a month and a half, Ibis is coming and doing some demos. So, utilize Google and you'll be amazed. Your local bike shops will know when demos are going on, and also if you're looking at specific manufacturers, they will usually list what events they're going to with their demo fleet as well. So ride a lot of bikes, ride a ton of bikes, and if you've got one to ride in the meantime, be glad for that and buy the bike that you feel awesome about, even if it takes you 6 months or a year, whatever.
So for those out there who've never ridden a Spot, is it that different from like a Yeti or a Santa Cruz or a Trek or a Specialized?
It is a really, really unique bike. I will say, as a climber, it is such an aggressive climber, and it maintains a lot of that forward momentum when you're climbing in a very unique way. Now I will say the closest thing I've felt to it is a Yeti, but only on the climbs. It still has very different ride qualities on the descents. On the descents, the Rollik is, I mean, it's great because it's really aggressive. You've got all the suspension so you can cruise through things. It makes it somewhat forgiving, but for some reason the bike still feels really precise, more like a low travel bike. I don't know if it has to do with the, you know, the linkage and stuff like that, but I still feel like I can kind of put my tail end right where I want it. Whereas some of the more aggressive bikes that I've been on, it's just kind of like point and shoot, and it doesn't matter. But I like that I can still put that bike right where I want it. And so yeah, that's what I like about it. Is it's a lot of the stuff that I love about a lower travel bike and a high travel bike.
That's a great description. I totally agree. The closest feeling I've had to this bike on the climbs is a Yeti SB5 Plus. It just felt super light, and when I'd climb, it went farther and faster than I was expecting. But on the descents, the Yeti really let me down, and the Spot was like the best of both worlds, which every bike review and every bike company says that. You're gonna have to try it to see if we're right or not, but there's something to that living link. So there's got to be some things you don't like about the bike. No bike's perfect. What do you dislike about the Rollik?
I have to dig deep for this. The only thing I can think of is pretty piddly. And I promise you, like, I'm not sponsored by Spot. I can say whatever I want about this bike. Probably the thing that I like the least is that it has red on it. It's a black bike, but it has an accent, and I hate it when black bikes have accent colors, because that's the whole point of having a black bike, is so you can choose the accent colors. At least to me, that's my take on it. But you know, that's pretty vain and pretty unimportant. I'm trying to dig deep and see if there's anything else.
You spend that much on a bike, you want to love what it looks like. You want to love the way it
looks, and there's other things.
The black and red looks good standing still, but when you try to accessorize with it and match your shoelaces to it or your grips,
cool colored pedals.
Yeah, red and black's kind of boring.
Yeah, and yeah.
Unless you get my color red, and that color pops. And I normally hate red bikes, but that tomato red, when it's mostly red, is cool. But when it's black with a little bit of that, I agree, kind of.
And it's okay, like, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I just think the whole, you know, you have a red bike already. Like, if you're gonna make a black one, make it black.
I don't like the name Rollik. It seems funny and it doesn't roll off the tongue. I like the Mayhem name. That's a cool sounding bike. Yeah. So we're not sponsored by Spot, but they gave us a hat and a t-shirt with the purchase of our bikes because they know us and they like us, but we're not sponsored by them.
Yeah.
Anyway, what else don't you like? I think the frame itself is super sexy looking.
Yeah.
Like the swoops and the curves and everything. It's a good looking bike.
And I will say one thing that's cool about the black one as opposed to, like, Steve's red one is awesome. My last bike was red, so I was excited to do something not red. But one thing that the black one has is you have like this cool checkerboard kind of pattern that you can see in the raw carbon, and that looks really cool. I think that's kind of a fun thing that you get with the black one that you don't with the red. But
they use high-end carbon, and that's pretty cool. I didn't love the weave color, so I'm glad you do.
Yeah, it's fun. It's different.
How about anything about the ride characteristic you don't like?
Honestly, there isn't anything I don't like about the way that rides. Yeah,
it rides so well.
I don't know. I mean, it still is a high travel bike, so there are things that I still like to whip out my hardtail for, that are a little more fun to just have like a 130 fork and then be on the hardtail. But I mean, really, I mean, when I want to be on my Rollik, it's riding how I want it. It's just, yeah, it really is. It's lively on the climbs and the descents. And, you know, like, I can't do a lot of the cool stuff that Steve can. Like, I can manual, like, off of something, but I can't, like, actually manual yet or do any of that stuff. I can do a little bit of jumping, but it's not something that I've spent a ton of time working on skill-wise yet. But I can jump a little bit on that bike.
Well, that being said, she was sick the first day she rode it. We were on Canyon of Fools in Sedona, and she was like hopping off these water bars and like catching air.
Yeah.
And it was inspiring her to be more playful than even on her 5010. Like, I was just like, dang girl, you're catching air and jumping. And she's like, I went way farther than I thought I would off that jump.
Yeah, I was amazed how like minimal input, and that bike, it would just want to get airborne. And you know, I love, like, when I'm riding, like, just kind of practicing kind of like bunny hopping over curves in the trail, and and like jumping little rollers and looking for little things to manual off of. And it really, like, in that sense, it's a lot like the Mach 5.5, that it's so easy to manual off of rocks and roots and things like that, and over like techy little sections I can just doing and bound over it. And that does remind me a lot of the Mach 5.5, I will say, on the descents. But I feel like the Rollik is still a little bit more precise and easy to put where you want compared with the Pivot Mach 5.5.
It's ironic that you mentioned the Mach 5.5. Tess has not seen my review video yet.
Yeah, I told Steve, I was like, let's chat, and I won't watch your video till after.
She didn't want it to taint her description, and my description was exactly the same. As it feels like a 5010 or a Yeti on the up and a 5.5 on the down, and those are the two closest bikes I can compare it to. So who is the wrong audience for this bike?
I would say if you're mostly riding like smoother, more mellow trails, you're not really into riding steep terrain, you just kind of like rolling ambly stuff, like honestly like a hardtail is great, or something in that, you know, 130 travel range and the full suspension range is going to be fantastic.
So if you do like 130 bikes and you like the suspension characteristics she's describing, you should check out the Rolex little cousin, the Mayhem. It's 130. You can run up to a 150 fork. It can be plus tired or 29ers, and it has that same lively sprinty action to that suspension that I've never felt anything else like. And when we were at Outer Bike, we were riding $10,000 bikes like back to back to back, and that one was the one that just jumped out to me and was like, this is so different than every other bike in a good way, by a big margin.
Yeah,
I think that'd be a good bike. But I'm with you, like when we were in California, riding Northern California, we were mostly on flow trails and really smooth stuff.
We rode a lot of XC stuff.
And while the bike did fine on it, it probably wouldn't be my first choice because you couldn't really push it, and that bike's fun to push. And like honestly, the head tube angle is very slack on the Rollik. It doesn't bother me on the smooth stuff, but if you're not riding steeper terrain, like, you don't need that slack of a head tube angle. So, you know, there's definitely better bikes, but yeah. You think a beginner would do well on that bike? I think being on a lower travel bike or even a hardtail will give you a better foundation as a beginner rider. I feel like you'll develop better skills and get a better feel of like where the back end of your bike is and things like that. So I probably wouldn't recommend just starting on a super high travel bike. I'd say, yeah, go with something small that you can really learn to feel what's going on the bike before you jump to something aggressive. So who's this bike made for? I think that this is great for people like me who, you know, maybe sometimes you do ride some flow trails and some stuff that's smoother, but you really enjoy the stuff that's more technical with some steep sections, working on more those skills that are pushing you from intermediate to advanced level of riding. And yeah, it's just going to be aggressive but still really, really fun on the descents. So I really like natural rooty, rocky trails. That stuff is super fun for me, and like I think this bike is super fun on that. So yeah, I think it might be a little bit outgunned in a bike park. Absolutely, I could take it to Whistler and have a blast on it. But if you're mainly doing shuttle runs and mainly doing bike park, you're going to want something with more travel, obviously. But it is super versatile for just your, you know, weekend warrior, loves riding fun tech and progressing your skills. So Spot specs their bikes extremely well. I only changed out things because I already had them from my old bike, like the wheels, but I was swapping Envies for Nox. It was apples and apples. They're both world-class wheels. What have you swapped out parts-wise, or what don't you like about the parts that come with, or what do you like with the parts that came with your Spot? I really love the brakes that came on it. Is it Guide RSC? Yep. Those are really nice. They just have a little more adjustment and stuff like that, so that has been really awesome. I did replace my saddle. I would say, you know, if you're a female rider, like, you don't need to ride a women's specific bike.
That being said, I got nothing bad to say about women's specific brands. I think it's cool to have stuff that is branded toward what a lot of women like the look of. They do a lot to build the women's community. They're trying different things and experimenting, and I totally applaud that. Anything that gets, you know, women excited to ride is a totally good thing. But you don't necessarily need a women's specific bike. But one of the most important upgrades I always feel like on a bike, if you're riding a unisex bike and you're a female rider, is to get a women's saddle. And so I am running the Ergon SM women's saddle. That was a really big one for me. I also put my Knox wheels on it with my P321 hub. I love my Knox wheels. I didn't get the build that came with the NV.
Yeah, she got a 5-star build and I got a 6-star.
So fantastic. I already like, I felt like 5-star. I'm like, this bike is already too good for me. I don't want to push it, you know, because I'm still learning about bikes and stuff like that. But that being said, it's a phenomenal build. I love my bike. It's also the first 12-speed bike that I've had. It's got Eagle X01.
Yeah, how do you like that?
It's really good. I mean, like Steve and I kind of joke, the good and the bad of having 12 speed is that you use it. Because you think, when you first get it, you think, I don't need a 12th gear, you know, you try to stay out of it, but eventually you kind of get used to the fact that it's there and you start using it, and it's fine. It's fine. I would say sometimes climbing through techie stuff, I do actually need to get into one harder gear because it's just a little bit too spinny and I can't quite get enough power through there, and I'm like, you know, pedal striking a bunch and things like that. So that's good too, because it's forced me to be a little more aware about my shifting and what gear I'm in and stuff on climbs. So it's good. It's just built awareness, so it's not necessarily bad.
So all things considered, what grade would you give this bike out of 100?
Out of 100?
Think of every bike you've ever ridden and how it stacks up against them. Out
of every bike I've ridden, I mean, it's like 100%. Like,
seriously? You're not just saying that? I gave it a 99. I love this bike, but you would pick 100.
I don't know. Maybe I should say like 95,
you can say 100,
just to allow a margin of error. But
is there anything about the ride you would change?
No. I mean, I don't have as much experience. I haven't been on as many bikes as you, so it's totally understandable if you would give it a, you know, like one less grade. But
I probably should have
like,
given it 100.
I should give it 99 because it's got that red on it.
There you go. Minus 1% for that.
Minus 1%.
So here's the next question. I know my answer. So what would the second best bike you've ever ridden rate out of 100?
My next favorite bike that I've been on was the Ibis HD4. But I'd still say after riding the Rollik, it's still like 80% there, you know, like.
The Rollik's 20% better than an HD4.
Yeah, just because it has, I mean, I feel like it's a little bit better climber, and even downhill, it's just got an even livelier feeling. That being said, the HD4 was super lively.
Sure, we're not bagging on
downhill,
Ibis.
but I mean, it's just amazing how with minimal input on the Rollik, that thing gets airborne. Like,
I'm with you. I love the HD4, but I'd rate the HD4 like an 87, maybe a 90 max, and the Rollik's that much better. Like, if my Rollik got destroyed and your Rollik got destroyed, wouldn't it be sad riding a different bike?
It would. I mean, like, I can ride a different bike, but
it would bug me.
I'm super happy.
The whole time I'd be like, this isn't my Rollik.
And it's kind of like, you know, I'm so glad that I rode so many bikes before I pulled the trigger, because it's kind of like dating, you know? Like, you should date a lot of people before you settle down, because you want it to be like, oh, this is awesome when you meet, like, the person that you want to, like, spend your life with. And that's kind of how I felt about this bike. I was really glad that I'd been on so many bikes, and I was really narrowing down my list, and I had, like, the geek chart with, like, you know, the spreadsheet with all the specs and stuff like that we all do, and but it felt good to be on the Rollik and be like, this is the one.
So spots aren't in bike shops. People can't just run down to their local shop and ride one. Is it good enough that they should seek out and drive to an outer bike and go ride one?
If you have the ability to. I realize that that's not an option for everybody, but I mean, definitely if that's something that you could take, you know, and spend some vacation days going to an outer bike, or You know, if you're near enough to the Western United States to go to Colorado and ride one on site, you know, if that's something you have the ability to do, yeah, totally worth it.
There's two types of people on the planet. The person who looks at the menu and spots what they want and orders it, or the person who has to read every single item and then pick the best one. That's me. I have to read every single item, and it probably drives a lot of people crazy. I have to ride every bike possible. If I'm spending 5 to 10 grand on a bike, it better be the best bike I've ever ridden. So in my mind, yeah, it's worth spending $200 or $300 or $500 to get somewhere where you can test one of these. We have a buddy who wanted to test one, and he showed up a day late to the festival, and all the Rolex and all the Mayhems were gone, and so the word's getting out. And so on day one, they were asking, you know, giving demos out, but then the demand was so high they started putting a reserve list for the next day. So if you do go to an outer bike or something like that, get there early and get on one of these early, because the word's getting out, and these are cool bikes.
But at the same time, we're definitely not the people who are just like, just take our word for it and buy it. Like, ride it. Like, absolutely. You may have different, you know, things that you're looking for in a bike. So so that's why we feel so strongly that, you know, if you're thinking about it, you should ride it and make up your own mind and see if it's what you like.
So if you're one of those people that buys bikes on paper and like compares the price of a YT Capra with a Canyon with a Specialized, and you go with the cheapest one but you've never ridden any of the three, I would urge you to reconsider. Now, I understand money's a tight thing, and I'm not saying just spend as much as you can, and money's important. But at this price point, what you're really buying is the frame. The frame determines how it rides. The frame determines how it corners. The frame determines how it descends. And that's why we ride. I was always of the mindset of buy the best frame you can with entry-level parts and then replace the parts as needed. And, you know, I would urge caution to those people who just buy bikes based on someone else's word or off the spec sheet or off of, you know, this is the cheapest full suspension bike that comes with Eagle GX and a Pike on the front, so it's obviously the best value. I mean, you can put the best parts on a Walmart bike and it'll be cheaper, but it won't ride like an amazing bike.
Yeah, I feel like these bikes kind of have souls, and you can take two bikes that look almost the same, like they seem almost identical on paper, but they might feel really different once you actually get them out on the trail. So it's worth riding. That's
the moral of the story. Always ride the bike before you buy it, because some bikes ride so differently than you would think they would.
So thanks for sitting around and listening to us chat about this bike a little bit. I am pretty dang pregnant at this point, so I wasn't able to really push the bike by the time we were ready to do the reviews, but I wanted to make sure that I got to tell you guys what I think about this bike, and you know, I did get to put some good miles on it before I started getting really big and having to be super careful. But thanks so much for watching. Make sure that you check out Steve's comprehensive full review. I will make sure that I link that. Take care, everybody. Happy bike shopping, and get dusty.